Well, hello everyone and welcome to the RaceWeek Midweek show, where today we will be looking back on the Belgian Grand Prix as well as looking ahead to the Italian Grand Prix and also going through the news that has taken place in between the Belgian Grand Prix and the Italian Grand Prix. So before we introduce, make sure you leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/RaceWeekShow. And there will be more social media platforms incoming. So, let's go into the news. To kick things off, the big news in between today and on Sunday is Williams. And this is the end of an era as Frank Williams and Claire Williams, it's been announced, will be leaving the team after this weekend's Italian Grand Prix. And this is the end of an era. I believe Frank Williams is Formula One's longest serving team principal in history. And it's a real shame that it's no longer going to be run by the Williams family. But Frank Williams will forever be there in spirit for as long as the team survives. He has built this team and he can watch the team's future in retirement and be proud of everything that he has put together. But it's quite sad news to see the end of an era like this. In the meantime, we will have fans back at races next week in the Tuscan Grand Prix. We will see approximately 3,000 spectators, albeit at quite ridiculous prices, but there will be approximately 3,000 spectators at the Tuscany Grand Prix, and then in Russia in a few weeks there will be 30,000 spectators as well, and there are going to be spectators in Portugal and Turkey, with Turkey apparently trying to have 100,000 spectators, as well as the likes of Imola, Germany, the Eiffel Grand Prix, the Nürburgring, and Bahrain also hoping to host fans, whilst Abu Dhabi will be behind closed doors. And in other motorsport, we have seen the British Touring Car Championship last weekend at Knockhill. Ash Sutton managed to claw some points into Colin Turkington's margin after taking 2 race victories in the first and second races. Colin Turkington took 2 second places. Colin Turkington came actually quite close to getting ahead of him and taking a victory. But it was Rory Butcher who won the third race. And in the championship standings, it's a 10-point gap between Turkington and Sutton. Rory Butcher's in third ahead of Oliphant, Camesh, Ingram, Chilton, Morgan, Hill and Proctor. And supporting it, we had the British Formula 4 Championship, where Luke Browning once again had a successful weekend. Not as successful as in Alton Park. He took 2 race victories in the first and the third race and has extended his lead. His championship rival, Zach O'Sullivan, took the victory in the second race after a collision between Abby Pulling and Roman Belinsky at the first corner pulling out of the race and resulted in Belinsky being disqualified, and Zach O'Sullivan took complete advantage of the situation, but he was not able to claw back anything that much into Luke Browning's total. Luke Browning now has quite a lead in the drivers' standings. It's now up to 38 points, and he is looking on to take the British Formula 4 Championship right now. It's looking good for the Fortec driver. So, that is the news, and there is a lot of it. There was a lot of it. Well, not really many things to cover, but a lot of big news for this episode. But now, let's go into some analysis of some of the events of the Belgian Grand Prix, where we talk about certain issues and topics that arise from the Belgian Grand Prix. Now, the first thing that has to be talked about was the big talking point from Spa. What is going on at Ferrari? How can you lose 2 seconds worth of pace on the straight, on the Kemmel straight alone? I mean, a lot of people think that it must have been the FIA's ruling that resulted in this, but surely just a little bit less fuel being dumped in the engine is not worth 2 seconds. So it's a real mystery, and apparently even Ferrari themselves are struggling to explain it. But I wouldn't be surprised if what has happened with Ferrari is that they try to make up the deficit, because I think the end of last year, where they mysteriously lost a bit of pace, was around the amount of pace that you'd lose by losing that a little bit of fuel being dumped in the engine. But it seems that what I personally think may have happened is Ferrari may have tried to make up for that loss somehow, but ended up taking multiple steps backwards in the process. But still, how can you lose 2 seconds? And secondly, in the scary incident that we saw involving Giovinazzi and Russell, this really does actually show that the main talking point about this incident was the fact that the tethers did not hold the wheel onto the car. So maybe the tethers should be strengthened, but Russell was well protected by the halo, for if the wheel had gone out, then the halo might have deflected that. But I don't really think that's obviously that does need to be addressed. But the fact is, we had another case of a tyre wall pinging a car back onto the track, and of course we have seen in the past how serious that can be, with a car being pinged off the barrier into oncoming cars. And I think that is something that equally needs to be addressed from that. But obviously wheel tethers also needs to be addressed, as people are saying. And then Red Bull have headaches. And this is another thing that needs to be talked about. What do Red Bull do? Because Alex Albon is struggling at the moment in that Red Bull. He had a better weekend in Spa, but he is struggling compared to his teammate. And you've got Pierre Gasly, who is doing really well in the AlphaTauri right now, being one of the drivers of the season. I mean, as you can see, this is his overtake at Eau Rouge. As you can see, this was a very risky move. Look at how much Perez squeezes him. Had there been a bit of contact, it would have been an absolutely colossal accident. But yet, Pierre kept his foot stuck in, and then by the time they got to the corner, he left Perez with absolutely no option but to back off. And he made that move stick. And, of course, if this was Albon's first year in the Red Bull and Gasly's first year in the Toro Rosso, it would be obvious what they need to do, which is swap the two drivers. But the thing is, Gasly was struggling in a similar situation to Albon last year. Struggling on a similar level. But now he's going back he's back in the AlphaTauri, and he is doing well. And I've said this many times before, I think there is an issue with putting inexperienced drivers in that situation. I'm not really sure Gasly is ready for that yet. Maybe he needs a year or two before being thrown into the Red Bull. And finally, this was something that was a bit of a concern after the Formula 2 race on Saturday. Are the stewards cranking down a bit too much? Because my opinion on the Tsunoda and Mazepin incident, and this was an incident where, if you don't know, Nikita Mazepin ended up being penalised for it, and that handed Tsunoda the win. But is there a fine? Does this cross the line between hard racing and forcing another driver off the track? Because I thought that penalty was a little bit harsh, and it did make me think, are they punishing drivers too hard and detracting from the racing by doing this? Basically sending a signal that you can't race. So here you can see, Yuki Tsunoda gets the run on Nikita Mazepin, going into Les Combes. He's on the outside and he manages to fight his way around the outside. The two cars are side by side. But as you can see, yes, Nikita does go very deep into the corner, but also Yuki Tsunoda is kind of going deep as well. And they're kind of neck and neck. So this is on the limit. And I think there's not much of a... There was a case for both, probably a case for both. But if it's for whether you can make a case for penalising him and making a case for not penalising him. But if there is an incident that's on that line, do you just let them get away with it and see it as hard racing? Because if you penalise drivers for that, then that might stop drivers from racing as hard as we want to see. But that is the analysis. And now, that is now all I'm going to be talking about from last weekend's race until the moments of the week. And now it is time to look ahead to this weekend's Italian Grand Prix at Monza. So, the Italian Grand Prix, which will be taking place at the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza, a historic venue which is not going to feel the same this year without having the spectators, which is typically what makes it a very exciting event. But it's still the fast track that it always has been. It's a 3.6 mile track, 5.793 kilometres in length. It's got 11 corners, and there will be 53 laps to contend. This race, the lap time is often very quick around here. It's often because of the high speeds, and it's often this race falls well below the average hour and a half that a Formula 1 race typically lasts. But that's because it's a very fast track, and slipstreaming, although I think that has been kind of sanitised with the introduction of DRS in recent times, but slipstreaming and DRS passing is quite common around here. And in the past couple of years, we have seen a fairly exciting race at this circuit. So, let's take you round a video lap of the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. So, onto the main straight, which is the iconic pit straight underneath the podium. They unfortunately won't be standing in front of the fans this weekend, but on the very long pit straight into the heavy braking zone, that is the Rettifilo. We often see a little bit of drama here because it's a very heavy, tight braking zone. On the exit, you have to be very careful on the throttle that you don't spin the rear tyres up. Then you have Curva Grande, and side-by-side action does happen here. Slipstreaming does happen. There's no DRS in this zone, so you often have slipstream alone, which often works on here. Then into Della Roggia, which is another overtaking zone. You have to make sure you keep the throttle kind of pinned on the exit to get the best of exit. Then into the Lesmo corners. The first one is very long. You have to make sure you have a good line through there. Then the second one is quite precise in terms of line, otherwise you will lose a bit of time. Now down the second of the DRS zones into probably the most difficult section of the track, Ascari chicane. You have to take into account the second and third part of the chicane, because otherwise you need to keep the throttle pinned there, otherwise you lose a lot of time on the run down to the Parabolica, which has kind of been sanitised, but it's still the thrilling corner that it always has been. You have to be really careful on the exit not to extend, and then obviously you need a good exit, otherwise you'll suffer down the main straight. And that is a lap of Monza. And the drivers will have to negotiate that 53 times on Sunday. So, let's do a team-by-team review in reverse constructors order for this weekend's Italian Grand Prix. Oops, they're not last in the constructors, are they? Of course, I have spoken about the fact that it is their last race under the management of Claire and Frank Williams, and they are being said to have a draggy car in terms of how good they could do this weekend, but they should have the pace against their rivals such as Haas and Alfa Romeo, and the reasons I'm about to talk about. Well, I think they are expected to struggle this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if Haas and Alfa Romeo are the slowest teams this weekend because of the underpowered Ferrari engine, which is obviously going to be exposed around this circuit. As I just said, Haas and Alfa Romeo might struggle, though Alfa Romeo did show a sign of improvement in Spa, but I think the Ferrari engine is going to bring them down this weekend. AlphaTauris have been shown to have a reasonable car on high-speed circuits, and Pierre Gasly is really making the most of this car, and I'm expecting more of the same this weekend. I'm expecting more starring performances from Pierre Gasly. So it'll be interesting to see if he can continue that momentum from the past few rounds. Well, after Spa, I think they have reasons to be optimistic going into this weekend. They've got a great car in a straight line of Renault, and I honestly think that they could be fighting for a podium this weekend with that straight line speed that they've got. On the other hand, I think Ferrari are going to be dreading this weekend. If their downforce issues will not cause them as much issues this weekend, they've still got that underpowered Ferrari engine to rely on, and it could be a real struggle this weekend, and they could be in line for a home embarrassment. They have kind of underperformed a bit this year, but they have a good car in a straight line, and that could see them contend for quite good results this weekend if they make the most of it, which has been a bit of a struggle for them so far after a few poor strategical decisions. But if they make the most of it, they should be in contention for a good result this weekend. They did struggle a little bit more than I expected at Spa, but that Renault engine is pretty good. Obviously, Carlos Sainz will be hoping for better luck, but McLaren should be reasonable around here. Next up, we have Red Bull, and I don't really know how close Verstappen's going to be to the Mercedes, because Verstappen was fairly close at the weekend, closer than I thought he would be, but how good is that Honda engine going to be at this circuit? You can't deny that they go into this weekend as favourites. Yes, they had a bit of a straight line speed deficit at Spa, but that was because they were focusing on downforce as well. And they achieved a perfect balance. I'm expecting that they're going to be trimming their car up adequately this weekend. And I think that they are, once again, the favourites going into this weekend's Italian Grand Prix. So, looking at the drivers' standings going into this weekend's race, it is Lewis Hamilton that leads the way ahead of Max Verstappen, who still holds second. He leads by 47 points. Valtteri Bottas is in third, 3 points behind Max Verstappen, ahead of Alex Albon in fourth. Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris are level on points, are in fifth and sixth. Then you have Lance Stroll in seventh. Daniel Ricciardo and Sergio Perez are level for 8th in the standings. Then you have Esteban Ocon rounding out the top 10. Then you have Sainz, Gasly, Vettel, Hulkenberg, Giovinazzi, Kvyat, Magnussen, with Raikkonen, Latifi, Russell and Grosjean yet to score. Of course, this weekend sees the Formula 2 series supporting the Italian Grand Prix. And going into this race in the drivers' standings, it is Robert Schwartzman that leads the way by 10 points back to Callum Ilott. Yuki Tsunoda is in third on 111 points. Then you have Mick Schumacher on 106, Nikita Mazepin on 101. Then you have Guan Yu Zhou, Christian Lundgaard, Louis Delatrez, Dan Ticktum and Felipe Drugovich rounds out the top 10. At the moment, Robert Schwartzman has just retaken the championship lead. But you have to remember, Callum Ilott went well around this circuit last year, taking pole position and fighting for wins. He went really well around here, so I'm expecting that he could be back up at the front. And Yuki Tsunoda went well round here in the Formula 3 series last year, taking his only win of the season. And also watch out for Schumacher and Mazepin as well. And can Guan Yu Zhou get himself into what is a very close title fight up front? And we also have the Formula 3 series supporting the Italian Grand Prix this weekend, where we have a very close title fight between Logan Sargent and Oscar Piastri. This is the penultimate weekend of the season. The season finishes in Mugello next week. It is Logan Sargent that leads the way by 7 points back to Oscar Piastri in second. Then you have David Beckman in third, half a point ahead of Liam Lawson. Then you have Teo Pourchaire in fifth. Quite an interesting battle for third in the standings as well. You have Frederick Vesti in sixth, Lorem Zendelli in 7th, then you have Jake Hughes, Richard Verschoor, and Alex Peroni in 10th. And it has been a fairly interesting season going, and Monza typically sees some great racing in Formula 3, so let's hope that we see the same this weekend. So now it's time to go into moments of the week, and we start at number 5, which is where Ferrari have made the list for all the wrong reasons with their struggles. What is going on? I've obviously discussed about why they might be struggling, but still, how can you explain a loss of 2 seconds from year to year? At number 4, we have Daniel Ricciardo. What a weekend he had. And the way that he sent it on the final lap, in his words, put in the fastest lap of the race on the last lap. And another 2 laps, he might have got the podium. He really did send it. And Daniel Ricciardo was one of the big stories of the weekend. So that puts him in at number 4. At number 3, we have a dramatic finish in Formula 2, which I already talked about in the Formula 2 series, where we saw Mazepin and Tsunoda. It was a shame that it was ruined a little bit by that penalty. But still, it was great racing to watch between the two really good drivers that have really proven to be very competitive in Formula 2 this year. At number 2, we have Hamilton on the edge. And this talks about his qualifying lap in his pole position lap. It was incredible to watch. The car looked almost perfect throughout the corners. He looked like he was in full control, and particularly from the trackside cameras. The car was just gripping in places where it shouldn't. And it was just incredible to watch. This Mercedes is an incredible car. And Lewis is proving it, really getting the best out of it. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being Lewis's strongest year. But of course, at number 1, I have to put Racing for Anton Hubert. The tributes that were paid throughout the weekend were incredible. And I think all 3 series put on a great show in his memory. And that makes this the obvious choice for number 1 on the Moments of the Week list. We miss him. We wish he could have been on the track today, this past weekend. We wish he could be preparing to be on the track in Monza. And F1 and F2 and F3 did a great job to honour his memory. On that note, it is time to end the Race Week midweek show. But make sure you join us tomorrow for the Friday recap. Of course, we'll have the Saturday and Sunday recaps on Saturday and Sunday, where what we hope will be, it's expected to be a dry race this weekend, but we hope that it will. But we've seen some great racing in Monza in recent years, and we hope this year is no exception. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.